Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here. You've got quite an interesting project that's been proposed. So why don't you introduce yourself and kind of, I don't know, you can start from the beginning if you like. Or
Sure, you bet. Peter Vantuyn. I'm with the Bitterroot stock farm. And as you mentioned, we do have a project in the works. We have proposed a workforce housing development on a 26-acre portion of our land at the intersection, if you put in your mind's eye, the East Side Highway and Fairgrounds Road, and it's northwest of that. So kind of kitty corner across Fairgrounds Road from the high school.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so at the, Bitterroot Stock Farm is a fifth-generation family ranch. My wife and her two sisters are the current runners of the ranch and owners of the ranch. And we have been working through this generation of ownership trying to figure out what is the best way to proceed with the ranch. We're a cattle and hay operation. We're mostly on the west side of the East Side Highway. If you think about the Daly Mansion, that's kind of an in-holding within our ranch. Okay. So we are completely surrounding that on all sides, except for the lollipop handle, if you will.
Right, yeah.
Which is the road into the mansion. And then we have another field that's over by Tammany, where the rail trail is. So that's about a mile to the south.
Right, okay.
And it's if you're working out at the canyons and you're on one of the exercise bikes looking out the window to the west, that's our field that you see in front of you.
Is that the one you can access off of Big Corral?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Yep. And you can access the public. We put a public trail on there.
Yeah.
It's still on our land, but we wanted to offer that open to the public, get kids off the road, among other things.
Yeah, that's a neat spot.
And that's from Golf Course Road. You can get out onto it from Big Corral Road and also from the bottom of Tammany Hill.
Yeah, that's a great little hike. I've gone up there a couple times. It's
glad to hear it.
Nice view and
well-maintained
trail.
We had 100 fourth graders, Ryan, last week there. For the fourth year in a row, we've had a volunteer day on the trail with the fourth graders coming out near the end of their school year, and it was a blast.
Awesome. That's
and
cool.
And a fox ran across the trail while we were there, and the kids were having a great time. So
nice.
And they help us with vegetation. We planted a bunch of willows and some other smaller shrubs on that day, and did some wildflower seeding and moved a bunch of rocks around so that we can maintain the trail a little better. And
cool.
It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yep.
And you guys also own that section that's on the other side of East Side Highway where they're doing that utility work?
We used to own that.
Used to, okay.
We used to own that all the way up over to the mountains, over the top of the mountains. When I first came into the family in the late 80s, it was still that large. My father-in-law ran the ranch at the time, and he sold everything on that side of the East Side Highway back in the 90s. So
I've seen a lot of some utility work going on right there.
Yeah.
Between it's both on both sides of the highway there.
You bet. I can totally explain that.
Yeah, what's going, because that's separate from.
It is separate, but at the same time, these things are also related in the sense that what is going on right now is that an extension of the city sewer system from the city through our property and into the airport.
Okay.
So that all those hangars can be put onto the hangar cafe can be put onto the city wastewater plant.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is the septic system at the airport has been failing most of the time since 2012.
Okay.
And that creates, as we know, a pollution bubble in the groundwater, which is not great. And that's going to migrate toward the river, which we certainly don't want to see. And also what stands between the river and the airport is our ranch. And so we don't want our property to get polluted with the water problems there either. So we granted the county an easement to put a sewer line over to the airport. And the reason why they wanted to do it on our property is because the other alternatives would require pump stations, and those are quite expensive.
Yes.
Whereas if they come through our property, it's a gravity feed sewer, which is quite a bit cheaper to do and quite effective. We also gave them a road easement through our property in the same alignment as the sewer. The county, the city, and the state have all identified that Fairgrounds Road, East Side Highway intersection as one of the worst in the county.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, right. And we just had another accident there a few days ago. And what
Yep.
it's the topography there when you're coming north on East Side Highway.
Yep,
You
yep.
know, and you're trying to take a left out of Fairgrounds Road, that can get kind of dicey. And
Yeah.
we've seen that for decades on our land, because where do they end up? Through the fence in our
Right.
field. And if we happen to have cattle in that field, then the cattle can get up to their highway. a little
exacerbating the
easier.
problem, yeah.
Yeah. So we are, we have seen the growth here. It is all around us. We are trying to be productive members of the community and helping resolve some of those issues. And we also looked at that parcel of property. Again, it's about 26 acres near that intersection. Now we have a sewer going through the middle of it. We asked them to make sure that we had manhole covers on our field too, in case this proposal goes through. It gives us easy access.
Right.
And with the road realignment, we were like, what is the highest and best use of this land into the future? And that is actually something that the Bitterroot Stock Farm, through the many generations of ownership, has kept in mind. What community aspects, since we are so close to town,
Yeah.
if you were to look, at Google Earth and look at Hamilton now, the highest density residential development in Hamilton is 15 feet from our field.
Yep.
On Providence Way there. And, we're dealing with way, way, way more neighbors now than we ever used to on pretty much all of our fields, including the Tammany area too. So
Right.
that we're looking at that and we're like, okay, we want to be supportive of these sewer things to reduce pollution, transportation safety. Okay, that means that field is going to be isolated. And in talking with my wife and her sisters, they were trying to decide, okay, what are we looking at here in our 5-year plan for the ranch? We're fully committed to continue the cattle and hay operations that have been going on since 1886. We've got a lot of other projects that are going on. The rail trail is just another example of one that we do for the community. And we've got other weed control aspects that we're working on, because that seems to be a growing problem. It always has been.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
been if anybody has used a cheatgrass, this year is just a banner year for cheatgrass.
Yeah, I was going to say I've seen
Holy
more of
cow.
it popping up than
Then
I can remember. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And so we deal with a lot of that stuff as well.
Okay.
But then looking, long term, what is it really the highest and best use of this? My wife and her sisters made the decision. They're like, what? We think housing development is the appropriate thing here, much as it pains a rancher to give up land.
Yeah.
And, what led us to that conclusion, Ryan? Well, we talked a little bit about it already, the infrastructure coming in there that the community needs, the highest density residential development right next to us. But we also are part of the community, and we know a lot of people that work at RML or GSK or Bitterroot Health, or plenty of other businesses. And what they've told us is we have a significant challenge with getting employees into our businesses because of lack of housing in the area.
Absolutely.
And you see this.
Oh, yeah,
I
100%.
assume with your job, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have a significant lower amount of listings than normal. I mean, there's a lot of factors going into that. But we were looking at it earlier this year. I can't speak to it in the last month or so, but in the first quarter we were down. We had about 50% less listings than we did pre-pandemic in the area.
Yeah.
And so we have half as many listings on the market as we normally would.
And how do you characterize those listings in terms of cost and things? Because
cost has definitely gone up. I mean, but that's a nationwide
Yep.
phenomenon. I mean, that's what happens when you print 34% of the money supply that we that we currently have in the span of a couple of years. So cost of everything has gone up, of course. So that's going to make everything more expensive.
We saw that too. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
when we talk to the employers, just one example is the hospital has, I think, 800 employees in the valley, and they have 900 jobs. And so they have 100 job openings.
Yep.
Holy cow. how do you, this is a hospital. This is something that's, critical to the
Oh
public
yeah,
health and safety,
absolutely.
right? And, not, and seeing them so underemployed. And they say that their biggest challenge is housing for
Oh
people
yeah.
coming in
I
and
mean,
affordable housing
yeah,
for people
it's
coming in.
challenging right now. Rent is high because there is a lack of availability in that realm as well, and we need people in this valley to work certain jobs, and yeah, there's absolutely not enough places around for them to find living. So
So,
yeah, let's get into
yeah, so we looked at the
that
map.
project.
We looked at the map and we're like, okay, this housing need is real. The growth is here. We've seen that happen incrementally over the years, and then a big surge with the pandemic as well. And the challenge with the housing led us to say, okay, we're not going to just take this land and put one road through it with 10 or 20 single family houses that we could, sell for X amount,
Yeah.
as you often see, because that isn't meeting the community need.
No,
And
and that's one thing that really interests me about this project is that um, you can go online and look at the DLazyS.
that's right,
Um,
d-lazy.s.com.
okay, yeah,
And that's our brand.
okay, yeah,
And it's also what we are naming
and
the
they've
subdivision.
got you've got the map up there, the proposed
Yep.
map of what the space is going to look like, and it's incredibly unique in terms of what is being proposed in this valley, I think, because it's taking a different approach from what you normally see, like where you have a subdivision with, it's maybe 50 acres with 10 to 15 homes on it or something
Yeah.
like that. And everybody's got an acre.
Yep.
And so you have, which is nice for some people,
Yep,
but we also
totally.
could benefit from a little more higher density. And I know that's become a bit of a
Yeah.
bad word around here, but
Yep.
if you do it properly, which I think
That's what we're aiming for.
well, yeah, if you do it in a way that is conducive to building a community rather than just putting homes in, I think that's going to stand out.
And so we thought the same way, Ryan. So we were talking among ourselves, what does it mean to actually build a community when you're doing it
Yeah.
with a higher density development, right? I mean, this is not our day job.
Right.
So we were like, okay, housing, we could just sell the land and somebody could come in. And as we said, you'd probably end up with that kind of single family subdivision, but that's not going to meet the workforce housing diversity of housing need that we think can help keep the prices down, pardon me, and keep opportunities for younger folks coming in or folks who may be wanting to move off their 5 acre ranches or
Yeah.
spots and move into something easier. So our development proposal involves a mix of housing types. And so those housing types include townhomes, and we also have what's called a muse down the middle of it, which is basically a townhome type unit, but the front of it is on green space and the back of it is an alley, which is how you access the house. So there's no road where you're driving up into the front and parking in front of your house. When you're in the front of your house, you're in with your neighbors on a green space, sitting on your stoop or
Oh,
your
beautiful.
porch, and there'll be a public trail through the middle of that. And then we also have 4plexes, 5plexes, and then we're doing what are called large and small mansion apartments. And you see these in downtown Hamilton, right? I mean, if you're on the south side of Hamilton or even on the north side in some spots, you see what is a pretty sizable house. And some of them have just a single family living in them. And some of them, if you look at the gas meters, there's 4 or 6 gas meters
Yeah,
on these things.
yeah.
And that means that building is actually broken up, even though it looks from the outside as one big house, broken up into separate units. And so we've designed that into the project as
cool.
well. And then the other thing that we learned is, and thought about is, we drove around Montana. We're like, what do we like? What do we see? And Butte was a really good example for us because what a unique history there with the mining, right? And with the Marcus Daly legacy. Marcus Daly started the Bitterroot stock farm, so we have tried to follow some of the values through the generations that the various owners have had through those years. And we thought, okay, let's look at Butte. We looked at Anaconda and a number of other places.
Right.
Butte stuck out though because it was really interesting. The shafts that went down into the underground mine where the people were working, when they would come out of those at the end of their shift, they came out of them into their community. And so they would have housing around the shafts. They would have neighborhood commercial, in some cases bars, restaurants, churches, all those kind of amenities right there in these areas in Butte. And it's really kind of a neat thing. And we were looking to see, okay, how do you factor that in and into what we do? And we also looked around for people that have experience doing this. And so we hired some expert consultants, and one of them really opened our eyes a bit to this. And they said, we're going to put a point in the middle of that field, and within a circle, we're going to create a circle from that point that represents a 5-minute walk. And within that 5-minute walk, we would like to see the basic amenities that you get in your daily life, whether it's the opportunity for like a general store or a pizza place or a daycare. So we have in the entrance to this development what we call live-work buildings. And we'll see how that goes. And so the storefront on it will be open to various kinds of things that people may want to do as a commercial enterprise, and either behind it or above it could be where they live.
Beautiful.
Or rental units, that kind of thing. And then throughout the whole property, for example, about 6 acres of the 22 is open space. And that's 22% or so in the calculation. And the city rules require that there be 11% open space. So we've done quite a bit of designing just to give a really open feel to it. In fact, we call this the DLazyS Meadows because on the south and west flanks of this, and a little bit on the east as well, it's going to be natural meadows with trails through them. We have irrigation ditches on 2 axes as well. That'll be integrated into these open spaces. There'll be a playground for kids and a gathering area for adults, and again, enhancing that sense of community. And we will tie it into the neighborhood because the city has been forward-looking to get some non-motorized trail connectivity around, and we certainly support that for sure. And we'd like to see that, our development connected into that along the Fairgrounds Road and the Providence Way developments as well. And frankly, if you're living in this community, Ryan, and either you're a high school kid or you have high school kids in the house, you would never get in a car to drive to the high school. It would take you longer.
Right. Yes.
You're going to walk, and so
that's
because
awesome.
it's right there. So
that's so I'll give you a background on myself, and to tie into what really made this project so interesting to me is I lived in Europe for a long time in Germany, and they have, they're very densely populated there.
Yes.
And so they have things set up not only because of the history, that's how things were done before anyway, like everybody lived in a village and was connected that way, right? But also just the density of population there. There's multiple routes to get around, and a lot of those, I lived in an apartment maybe a half a mile from where I worked, and I could walk to work. I could walk to a grocery store.
You felt safely walk?
Yeah, I wasn't walking on a major road. I wasn't walking on the same blacktop as a large truck, right?
Yeah.
They had distinct areas for bicycles and pedestrians, but I could also walk along a river
Nice.
right there, and then pop up in the old city and get to work. And it really changed my view of how things could be done. And there's also a lot of this mixed use going on as well. There's, businesses on the ground floor and apartments above, and you don't have to get in a vehicle to go everywhere. You can simply just walk out your door, go a couple minutes down the road and get your daily groceries. Not like Costco level stuff, right? But if you wanted to, I don't have anything in my fridge for dinner tonight. I need to go to the grocery store and grab like some salad or chicken or whatever.
And maybe you're going to get a stein of beer on the
way.
Of
course. That goes without saying. And you could do that easily without, you didn't have to go hop in your car and drive somewhere and do that and then drive back. It was quick and easy.
Hamilton was for so long, it's such a wonderful place, as we know. The quality of life here is just off the charts compared to so many other places.
Agree, yeah.
And for the longest time, we didn't have to sweat that kind of thing because the population was so small. But, when we've seen this population growth that we've had over these decades, we looked at that same thing you did, and we're like, you know what, we can do better than this. We can get people off the road. And frankly, that's what got us excited about putting the rail trail on that Tammany property, because that subdivision's over there on Golf Course Road. It's a mile from the high school, and you wouldn't want your kid going down Golf Course Road.
No.
And Big Corral's got a blind corner on
Yep.
it too. Not so cool, really. But now you can get on the rail trail and you get right to the high school.
Beautiful.
And we love seeing the cross country team running on that, and lots of people walking dogs.
Awesome.
And, you know, all that is good, and we want to bring that same approach to this proposal that we have, and that's why we've got a non-motorized trail network all the way through the middle of it, around the edges of it. You know, we've also, so that's kind of our social objective, if you will,
Okay.
Brian. We, of course, have a fiscal objective, too.
Yeah.
We're business people, and we want a reasonable financial return from it. Looking at those numbers, you already mentioned inflation. You know, what the thing that kind of opens
Yeah.
my eyes is when we start to see the estimates of what the infrastructure costs are to get this thing going, and they're quite high, especially in comparison to the kind of single-family, smaller density developments that you see, where the infrastructure needs are way less than what we see here. So that's one of our challenges. But we're also proposing, let's see now, there would be about 110 to 115 individual lots and about 225 housing units on the property of the various types. And some of them will be studio, some of them will be one bedroom and two bedroom. Most of those will be for rental market, and then there'll be 2 and 3 bedroom, like the townhomes and the Muse buildings.
Okay.
That's really we wanted that kind of range, that spectrum, if you will, and hopefully the market will be such that you can find something in there that you can afford and that you'll like.
Oh, I think so. I more studio apartments, I think, is a big benefit in the area as well, because there's not everybody needs
Yeah.
a large single-family residence to live
Yep,
in. Like
that's
myself, I'm a single dude, and I don't
Yeah.
have any kids.
Yeah.
I could do fine in less than 1,000 square feet in a studio, and it'd be great if if the rental price was right. It would be perfect. And if I could step out my door and walk to downtown easily, or just walk to a grocery store or whatever, and not have to go all the way across town to do that.
Yep.
It's
I mean, if there's an event at the fairgrounds, you'd be walking or biking. And
Yeah,
I mean,
perfect.
that's what you're going to do.
yeah.
And hopefully in the longer run, there would even be like a separated trail to allow you to do that. It kind of is already, if we can tie into that well. We're working on some of those design features.
Yeah.
Now. I'll explain in a bit where we are in the process.
Oh yeah, please do.
But maybe there's another aspect I'll touch on first, which is our approach to how this development interacts with our wonderful natural environment here in the Bitterroot. And that's really our third goal. We had fiscal goals, we had the social goals that we've just talked about, but we also have environmental goals. Some of them a little bit selfish. We are continuing to ranch the lands north of this, and the compatibility of a development with ranch land is something that we're experiencing on other borders of ours, and it can be something of a challenge to do that. We consider ourselves good neighbors, and we have many, many good neighbors, don't get me wrong, but it's still different when your neighbor is not a rancher like all of ours used to be, and now they're in housing, whether it's apartments or single family, and everybody has a different vision for what their backyard could look like, and they're building right up against our property line.
Right.
I mean, it's like 15 feet might be a lot. It might even be less. And so we end up with just windblown trash coming over the line, and we get kids that want to come pet the horses. We have Percherons. They're the size of a house practically.
yeah.
And we've had 6-year-old kids out there going, "Come here, horse," and it gets kind of scary on that front. In any event, so we're trying to look at the compatibility of development with our continued ranch operations, but we also want and understand that we need to figure out a good way to do development that limits as best modern technology allows the impact on the environment. And this was the trickiest one for me, because my wife and her sisters asked me to manage this project and to move it through the process. And we spent quite a lot of time talking about these goals, again, fiscal, social, and environmental. And I could figure out the fiscal and the social pretty logically, but the environmental, I'm like, okay, how do you quantify that? How do you really understand what impact you're having on the ground? And the answer was right in front of our face here in Hamilton, and that's the approach that biomimicry takes, and that's a company that started here in the Valley.
That's right.
And a concept that was really developed by Janine Benyus, who lives in Stevensville, and really thoughtful approach to it. And what she found is, in looking at nature, there are things that you can do in your human uses to try and replicate that and take it into account to make a better product in the end. And that biomimicry approach, again, based out of here, has been used by major corporations all over the world, like Microsoft and NASA, for example.
Yeah.
Big companies that include Google and Ford when they do new plants. The Coast Guard has used it. And, biomimicry helps them design features for their land, to understand the impact and design ways to help address that. And yet they had never done a subdivision. And so I asked them, I said, hey, would you be willing to do this? And they're like, oh, this is great. Let's do it. It's in our home. And clearly, residential development around the United States has been responsible for fragmenting a lot of habitat and having a lot of impacts to the area. So what they do is they look at your land, your 26 acres in our case, and they say, okay, what did that look like when it was a long, long time ago? What ecosystem services did that provide in terms of things like air quality, water quantity, soil health, biodiversity? And they look at specific factors, and they have computer programs and science that backs up how they judge it. And they say, you know what, back before it was used for agriculture, it provided these ecosystem services, and it quantifies them, and it says, we're just gonna call that, give it a number of 100. So that's like 100% effective at providing the ecosystem services. And then it looked at our land as we've currently managed it. And what that is agricultural land with, as I mentioned, it has irrigation on two sides of it, and that's more of a meadow feel on two sides of it because we can't produce hay from that directly. And they looked at that and they said, well, here's how it impacted all those metrics. And you know what? You're doing a pretty good job. This is kind of surprising. It's a 72 right now.
Hey.
And that was pretty cool. So, to see that was a good testament. I mean, we're producing hay, and the cattle eat that, so we're bringing, meat to the market and hay to people who buy that from us. So, we've reduced the 100, to 75% of that, 72% of that. But okay. And then we asked them to help us design a project that had a number as high as we could possibly get. And they looked at our plans, and we made some adjustments based on their input. Again, they're looking at things like, okay, what can you do in those fringe areas to increase biodiversity, to ensure that your water quality is addressed, so it's not just taking runoff from the road and the cars are going by an east side highway, but actually maybe filtering that through a bioswale, and then before it gets into the groundwater, it's cleaned again, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so we factored those into our plan, and they gave us a number in the mid-50s. And with that number in the mid-50s, we're going to be housing, if this goes through in the way that we've designed it, like 500 people. So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty decent.
And you'll take maybe some of those people that are now in maybe housing that has a failed septic, or maybe they're even living in an RV and having the challenges with the septic, the sludge, whether it's in their tank or in their septic. We see all that. We definitely looked at this from the perspective of trying to keep that number high, but it was cool because now we had a way to judge it and to quantify it.
Right, that's cool.
And they looked at the average Montana development and said, you know what the average Montana development number is? It's 18. As compared to that.
Really?
And the jury is still out, Ryan, but I'm not seeing a huge economic impact on our projections based on these interventions that we've done that biomimicry has helped us design. Again, the jury's still out on that. The market is going to be the ultimate gauge on it. But, it really is a pretty modest cost in the context of this project as a whole to get that number higher. And so we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, considering you have both we'll call it a positive environmental impact when you compare it to other subdivisions, but also the fact that you are building a place that will be conducive to a community aspect as well, rather than just having individual homes. That's kind of the feeling I get when I go to a lot of subdivisions. It looks like a community. It's like when you go to the supermarket and you buy a tomato in the middle of January. It looks like a tomato, but it's not really a tomato. You know, when you cut into it and look at it and compare it to one that's grown
Yeah.
in your backyard and you harvest it in August, it's a completely different product.
Yeah.
It may look the same from the outside, more or less, but it's totally different. And so when you have, when you take all those things into consideration and you proactively take steps to manage the environmental impact of having so many people on a piece of land, but also doing it in a way that benefits the environment, but doing it also in a way that will benefit a sense of community as well, I think is going to have a stellar impact on the area. And one of the aspects I think that a lot of people get concerned about when we start doing the high density is less the environmental stuff, but how it's going to impact them on the road, because that's kind of the thing. It's like you've got 20 more homes that are feeding into a main road now all of a sudden, so that's going to impact traffic significantly. But if we incorporate spots where they can walk to where they need to go, or and either outside of the subdivision or even inside of the subdivision, which you don't see really at all here, it's going to have a great impact on traffic.
So part of our responsibility in advancing this proposal is to study and understand what those potential transportation impacts will be. So we've done that, and we're in the middle of that process now with the city, and it's been, a good process. And the aspects that you mentioned just now come into play, and changing that East Side Highway Fairgrounds Road intersection also comes into play. So there's a lot of talk, in a parallel process with the county, to its credit, being proactive to try and deal with that problem now is something, again, that we support. And, what we do think is that it will hopefully have a neutral or beneficial effect on some of the traffic that comes from outside, because maybe we're going to reduce a little bit of the pressure to build far out on Hamilton Heights or up at Corvallis, and people coming down the East Side Highway. Maybe some people will choose to live in closer, and we've got the main artery of Fairgrounds Road there and the East Side Highway right next to it, and not far from Marcus. These are the areas that the growth policy that the Hamilton passed in 2022, I think it was, said, okay, this is kind of an area where we can handle this, as opposed to maybe other areas where the roads aren't quite as robust to deal with it. And of course, we have to design to take that into account as well. And it's right next to the high school, right? So you want to make sure you've got solid, safe crossings so that when people are going back and forth to school, it's safe. But how cool if you're a senior at the high school and you get to leave for lunch?
You walk
across the street and go get a slice of pizza. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, that's
Not
pretty
a
cool.
bad thing.
There's a market right there. Everybody from the high school just walk right over there.
Yeah.
And even if you don't live there, you can
absolutely
go utilize that. That's beautiful.
And it's going to have like a little center there, like a plaza area there where the work buildings would be. And, again, that's very close in proximity to the meadow and the playground area and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would love to see more of that around here, in distinct pedestrian areas where you don't have this shared use of cars and roads. I mean, that's something that I dream about downtown Hamilton, is taking just a couple blocks. You don't have to do the whole thing, but just, from like 2nd Street to 4th Street or something like that, and having that be a pedestrian area, and then you can have things happen outdoors all summer long, and even in the winter too.
Imagine, let's just put on our vision caps for a minute and think about what we have, that incredible asset along the river, and from Scalco Bend through Steve Powell Park, and, wow, how great is that? And then if we could connect that with things like the rail trail on the other side, of course, the Play Like Robert Foundation is working on a rail trail extension right now with the city and the county, and that would get people from the southern end of the rail trail and all those neighborhoods right to Daly Elementary. So we're starting to see this trend, and we want to be part of that.
Awesome. That's cool. So how far along are you with
let me explain the process. It's a learning thing for us too, because again, this isn't our day job, and one thing that led us to take this process on ourselves through to the entitlement, as what you call this approval process, the entitlement. We'd be entitled to build this subdivision if we get approved. One thing that convinced us to do it is that it is the way we can exert control over the end product. And if we were just to sell the raw land, then, again, we briefly touched on that. We wouldn't be sure what came out of it.
Yeah.
So we've learned a lot about that process. The first step is to file your application. You meet with the city and talk about what that should include, and we did that in an informal way. We held a public meeting at the Grange in February before we filed our application to try and get a little bit. We want to be transparent. We want to be open about what we're doing. We wanted to get early feedback. We had a good meeting. We got early feedback. After that, we filed our application, and the first step is they just tell us whether or not we've identified all the things that we need to. It's like a box check in the first step. They call it element review. Have you addressed every element in the rules? And so we passed through that relatively efficiently, and we're now what's called the sufficiency step. So you've addressed the elements, but have you addressed them sufficiently to meet the standards in the opinion of the city staff? And the city staff that look at it include the city planning staff, public works, fire, police, parks. Every major department in the city has a role in reviewing that. And then you also ask state agencies and the county for their opinion. So we're in the middle of that sufficiency step right now. We hope to be done with that within 6 or 8 weeks if all goes well. And then we get into what's called governing body review. And this is really, if you're a member of the public and you want to be heard on this project, this is where you would be most engaged. So there'll be 3 opportunities for that at hearings in front of the planning and zoning committees and then the city council.
Okay.
And if all of this goes as, routinely as subdivisions go, everyone's a little bit different, Ryan, so you never really know the timing of it. Sometime this fall, that city council decision will be ripe, meaning that they will have gotten all the information from the subcommittees at the city. They will have reviewed all of our plans. We've gone back and forth on it. They've gotten the public input, and so forth, and then they'll be like, okay, we're ready to make a decision. And so we think that'll happen, if all goes well, sometime this fall.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things are moving along smoothly, it seems.
Moving along smoothly. And then from there, there's still a lot of uncertainty because the market will dictate how things go.
Sure.
Those infrastructure costs come into play right then at that moment. And that's something that we're being careful to plan for as best we can. And, so when would we break ground? This has a lot of uncertainty with it. But, if we can get through entitlement smoothly, I feel pretty optimistic that the market is there. We've had interest, people just calling saying, when's this going to come?
Oh,
We want
yeah,
some
I believe
housing,
it. I
or,
believe it.
I want to put something in that live work, and what are your prices going to be? That's actually a question that's probably worth addressing too.
Yeah.
What are your prices going to be, Peter? And I be perfectly honest, we don't know yet. We really won't know that until we get to the point where the horizontal infrastructure, meaning the roads and sewer, water, et cetera, all that stuff will be in, or at least we'll have a solid estimate of it, and then we can start planning out what things look like from there. We're not going to be the ones that in all likelihood do the actual development itself. That's even farther outside of our day job. And, there's a lot of ways you could be a black hole of money on that as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we're looking at controlling how that happens through not only the city entitlement, where they'll approve a project that looks like what we've been talking about here for the last little bit, but also through design guidelines that we'll apply internally to the subdivision so that all the houses are compatible. And
right, so
into the future.
like a contractor could come in and buy a couple lots
Yes.
and then develop it.
Exactly. And they'll have the design guidelines to help them along
Right,
with that.
okay.
And so we may get some folks that are interested, like developers, that, hey, we're really good at building townhomes. Or so we're going to take those, or we really like the live work stuff and we think that is good, or whatever the unit or product is, as they call it. That's that, and I'm having those conversations now, and they've been fun because people have a lot of feedback. Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? And I've learned a lot from them, and we've made some adjustments based on that. Examples include like how does the garage align with the house, and where you allow porches and stoops. And anyway, there's just sort of small things that I had not really thought about that some of these builders and developers like. That's a really important thing for people moving in to see they have these opportunities for
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So it's kind of neat. You probably see that in your job as a real estate agent.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But not like this. I got to say that. Not
Well,
on
I
this
hope
level.
that's a
This
good
is.
thing, right?
Oh no, it's very. For me personally, it's a super cool project. I'm happy to see that something like this is coming along because I think we desperately need a new way of thinking about living in this valley.
Yep.
You know, we've gotten very used to like it was. You know, there was a much lower population density here for a long time, and it's been growing over decades. And over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really exploded. And there's been, you know, there's certain areas in this valley that almost seem to be working actively against development and growth and thinking about the future. But the problem with that is people are still coming here. People want to come here, and we're going to see growth in population no matter what. So we might as well be proactive about it and start thinking about the ways we can do it where it's beneficial, where not only do we need it, but where we can do it in a way that steps outside the box that we usually do and benefit the community while we're doing it. Which
And I'm with you on that, Ryan. And the other factor that came into us is just respecting human dignity and our neighbors, because it really just it's tough, right, to drive south of town and to see that people are living through the winters here in RVs that aren't even necessarily hooked up to services. Because they're
that as
overcrowded.
well.
And that's just one tiny area where it is, and we know other places has a homeless problem that exists there too, and we really shouldn't ignore that for our neighbors and friends. And the people are teaching your kids, and they ought to be able to make a living doing that, and that includes having a reasonable place to live.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of the people that live and work in this valley are based in the service industry, right? And that's one of the most challenging careers to have in any populated area. That's what I did for a long time. I was a cook, a chef for many years, and you live I lived in several different cities across the U.S., and it is challenging because you don't make a ton of money. I was living in San Francisco for many years, and
That must have been tough.
I was working in food, and it's a fun job, but you don't walk away with a lot of money in your pocket at the end of the day compared to other careers that are in that same area. And you're slowly seeing people that work in service industries getting pushed out of the places that are close to where they work because they can't afford to live, within a certain distance of where they're working. And so they're getting pushed further and further out of the city, which means they have to commute longer and longer. And I think there's ways that we can keep that from happening around here. So we can have somebody who works at a restaurant in town or works at a grocery store or something, but can still afford to live close to where they work instead of...
We took heart in what Marcus Daly did when Hamilton was founded, and looking at the neighborhoods that he and his team designed around the core of Hamilton, right? And so you have these mix of housing types and alley access, and what he did at that time was to make sure that there are amenities like church lots for the various denominations of people that came in. He made sure that there was room for that and the other community amenities. And he was very thoughtful in planning, he and his team, very, very thoughtful in planning of that. And at some point, as the town grew, we got away from that a little bit. And so we're trying to, as we were looking at it, we're like, well, let's look at our own history here and see, what are the good attributes of the Hamilton development that has good on that we can integrate into our project. And that's what we really came to. And we hired these experts that do this kind of thing. And they came to Hamilton and go, man, this is pretty cool. This core downtown area, both north and south of town, that's actually pretty functional and pretty pretty darn cool, and seems like people really like to live there, and they sure keep, God, some of those houses are just beautiful, right? And the yards and everything else, and it just seems very functional. And so we tried to bring that approach and ethic into our project as well.
Well, and one important distinction I just want to make sure that we cover: Bitterroot Stock Farm is not Stock Farm Club.
That is correct, Ryan. Thank you for mentioning
I just want to make sure that gets out there.
There's some history there as well. But no, the Bitterroot Stock Farm is established in 1886 by Marcus Daly. My father-in-law did sell much of the ranch on the other side of the East Side Highway in the 90s after he inherited it from Margaret Seagray. And many people called her the Countess around here. My father-in-law had given the mansion to the state of Montana at that time, along with that land around it. My sister-in-law, Christina, who has lived here for a long, long time, she opened the gate for the first time in 40 years in the mid-'80s when that was opened up with the state ownership, and it still had all the furnishings in it. And, it was they've done a great job. We were just there the other day with some friends from out of town, and Yellowstone was filming there. I mean, they've done a good job with it, and we're really glad and respectful of them as an inholding within our ranch. So, those kind of things are at the forefront in our mind as well.
Beautiful.
And that stuff.
Beautiful.
So,
any last thoughts? I know you got to get out of here soon. So
yeah, when we get into the public process, if you're willing, Ryan, and want to, I'm happy to come back and
I'd love it.
Talk about some of that public input that we received.
100%.
And talk about, hey, well, how do you want to deal with this? Because we feel strongly this is a community conversation that needs to happen. We're not just trying to put a wall around this and say it's nobody's business but ours.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it.
All right,
Peter. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
Keep me updated, and definitely have you back when things progress.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.
Right on. Thank you. Bye, everybody.